Hi, Doug Andrew here. In this episode, you are going to be able to answer the questions that clients often ask. Doesn't life insurance, specifically universal life insurance, cost more the older you are? Well, if you really get what I'm going to teach you right now, you're going to understand that universal life can get cheaper. It should get cheaper as you get older. Did you hear that? See, I often ask people, have you ever seen a life insurance policy that gets cheaper as you get older? And they go, no, because they're thinking of the cost of the insurance that keeps going up through the years based upon the mortality table we talked about in the first episode of this educational series. If you understand what I'm about to teach you, you're going to be able to show people how you're self-insuring. The cost of the insurance goes down the older you are. And these are provided under tax citations in the Internal Revenue Code. So get ready. I'm going to talk about TEFRA and DEFRA in this episode, and then that will set us up for the TAMRA tax citation in the next. So let me give you a history. I want you to be able to recite this history briefly to a prospective client so they understand, hey, this has been around for a long time. Because a lot of people say, well, how come I've never heard of this? How come everybody's not doing this? I'll give you the answers in future episodes to that. But basically, when was it born? 1980. It was not an insurance company. It was E.F. Hutton. So let me give you, again, a little idea of how it came about. E.F. Hutton said, why don't we give our clients a more safe, predictable rate of return than being in the topsy-turvy market, and put it over into the multi-trillion-dollar conservative insurance industry. They're the backbone of America. They're some of the best money managers in the world. And instead of trying to earn 15 or 16% to net after tax 10, why don't we just settle for 11 and net 10 and have a more predictable income, and it's totally tax-free? So that was the brainchild of E.F. Hutton. So I told you in previous episodes here that they started to do that back in 1980. And so I had clients that would come and they would reposition assets, let's say a total of $500,000. Now there's nothing magic about 500 grand, but I want to stay consistent throughout this educational series. And we're going to use that as an example of, remember what we call the GSP. So under the GSP, we're going to have a bucket that will hold up to $500,000. So $500,000 is the amount of money we want to be grandfathered to put into this bucket. That's called the guideline single premium. So here we had people throw in 500 grand. And as I illustrated before, they were earning 11 to 15% back in 1980 to 1990. So let's just say 11. But they were netting 10 because we were keeping the cost of the insurance as low as possible. They were putting money into a policy that wasn't even much higher than that. So they were self-insuring. So they were putting $500,000 into a $510,000 policy. Well, how much is at risk to the insurance company? $10,000? And that's why it turned into a cash cow. Now I'm just using an example here. But that's sort of the idea behind a maximum funded insurance contract. You're using it for living benefits. That's why people could put in $500,000 and start pulling out 10% tax-free. Maybe the death benefit is $50,000 on top of the five. So it'd be $550,000, but the insurance company is only at risk for the difference between the cash you have in there and the death benefit. Now, you can choose an option if you're trying to maximize what you leave behind. Instead of trying to maximize your income, you can have your cash be on top of the death benefit. Well, if you found out you had a terminal illness, you might want to switch to that option. But most of my clients, they were trying to use it for living benefits. So most of the time, I had the cash value qualify as part of the death benefit. And that's what turned it into a cash cow. So as we talk about the guideline single premium, this is where it started out in 1980. Now, when this happened, the IRS got suspicious and they went and said, what are you doing to E.F. Hutton? And they go, we're putting money into an insurance policy. And they go, well, who puts $500,000 of premium into a $550,000 policy? They went, our clients do. Well, they didn't. They thought E.F. Hutton was sort of taking advantage of sections 72E, 7702, and 101A of the Internal Revenue Code. They thought, well, wait a minute, this is tax-free because we're trying to help widows in that, and we think you're taking advantage of this. So they went to court, and E.F. Hutton won. They weren't doing anything wrong. It was life insurance. But that's when the IRS went to Congress and said, we need to change the definition of tax-free under these three sections of the code because we think they're overstepping the bounds of what we intended. Yeah. Every time government gets involved, they seem to bugger up a good thing. Long story short, in 1982, under what was called the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act. Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act. It is an acronym pronounced TEFRA. The IRS convinced Congress to create a chart, a corridor that dictated the minimum amount of life insurance that must come along with the GSP. If you want to put in $500,000, you had to have a certain amount of life insurance based upon your age and your gender and your health. Okay? In order for it to be tax-free, otherwise, if you violated this TEFRA corridor, you moved over from these sections of the code over to the investment section of the code, and it's going to be taxable now. You don't have tax-free. Well, TEFRA was passed. The IRS and Congress didn't even understand what they were doing. Does that surprise you? Yeah, they didn't even understand what they were doing. And so 2 years later, they had to sort of clarify it. They had to sort of clean it up. They had to amend it. So 2 years later, under the Deficit Reduction Act, spells DEFRA, they sort of brought these two tax citations together, and this is called the TEFRA-DEFRA corridor. So the TEFRA-DEFRA corridor dictates the minimum amount of insurance that the IRS requires in order for it to qualify to accumulate tax-free, give you tax-free access, and when you die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free. That's all TEFRA and DEFRA does. But let me explain something deeper that a lot of CPAs and tax attorneys do not understand. See, when the IRS and Congress passed TEFRA and DEFRA, they gave parity. Now, what's parity? Equality, okay? They wanted to make sure that it treated people that were young as well as middle-aged as well as older people the same. This is critical to understand. So perk up, listen very close. Under TEFRA and DEFRA, if you were a young person, let's say a 22-year-old athletic marathon running female, that means your mortality cost would be very low. If you wanted to put in $500,000, now very few 22-year-olds back then had $500,000, and so, but if you wanted to put in $500,000, you might have to have 10 million or more of life insurance, because the cost of insurance, the COI, in order to be commensurate, was very low for the 22-year-old. Now, remember the chart I showed you where the cost of insurance goes up as you get older? So if you take a 60-year-old, if they wanted to put in $500,000, the minimum death benefit might be $1,250,000. Now, this may be hard to read this way, but just listen to the number, $1,250,000. Now, you can get way more life insurance death benefit than $1,250,000 for $500,000. That's not the objective. The objective is to put in the most money, $500,000 that you want, and get the least amount of insurance the IRS requires under TEFRA and DEFRA tax citations to turn this into a tax-free cash cow so you can pull out 50 grand a year tax-free. That's what you're doing. TEFRA and DEFRA said a 60-year-old must have $1,250,000, but $1,250,000 does not drain out any more out of the spigot on this bucket, the COI, the cost of insurance. It doesn't drain out any more costs than it does for the 22-year-old female who had to have maybe 10 million of insurance. Well, what about an 80-year-old? How about a client of ours, a friend of our family, he was 79 when he came to us. He had 3 blocked arteries, but he cleared them up with angioplasty. He had adult onset diabetes, but he began to control it with diet and exercise pretty well. He had a prostate cancer episode, but he was doing okay with his PSA levels. But he had he had 9 siblings. He had 3 brothers predeceased him and 6 sisters predeceased him. All died before the age of 79, and he was 79. But he did have a better lifestyle. But he sort of had a few strikes against him because of all that. Now, he got rated. And so we were able to insure him with the insurance company, but TEFRA and DEFRA gave parity. They go, well, this 79-year-old, he wants to put in $500,000 and get 50 grand a year of tax-free income. So let's make this spigot on the bucket, the cost of insurance, the same as the 22-year-old and the 60-year-old. How do you do that? You let him get away with less insurance. He didn't care about the insurance. He wanted the income. So the amount of insurance on him was like $800,000. Well, again, who puts $500,000 into an $800,000 policy? He did, because he wanted what? Tax-free income. So listen close to this concept. When you squeeze down the death benefit, that's what it's called. You squeeze down the death benefit based upon the person's age, their gender, and their health. And if they're insurable, okay, a lot of people don't think they're insurable, but if they're insurable, even if they've had a heart attack and it's been 5 years since then, you wouldn't believe how many people we've insured who had cancer episodes and everything else. If they're insurable, we can squeeze down the death benefit under TEFRA and DEFRA so that they can earn 11 and net 10, just like the 22-year-old. So if their goal is to throw in $500,000 and pull out 50 grand a year tax-free, I'm simplifying this, if that's their goal, they earn 11 and net 10, even though they're 79 years old and have a few strikes against them. The 60-year-old earns 11 and nets 10. The 22-year-old female earns 11 and net 10. They all get 50 grand a year of tax-free income out of this, a net rate of return of 10%, because the amount of insurance required under TEFRA and DEFRA goes down the older you get and the more unhealthy you are. You wouldn't believe how many insurance agents don't understand what I just explained to you. So what does this mean? When you understand how to squeeze down the death benefit, it will perform no matter how old or even unhealthy. And if they're totally uninsurable, what did you learn? You put the insurance on a surrogate, your spouse, your kids, your grandkids. It's the owner of the insurance policy that gets all this tax-free income. It's the owner that has $500,000 maybe going in there and wants the $50,000 a year of tax-free income. This life insurance is put on somebody, maybe them. That's who I tried for first, but if they were uninsurable, I used their spouse, their kids, their grandkids. I own policies on my kids. My kids don't own them on me. I own them on my parents because I'm out to get the best net internal rate of return. And when they ultimately die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free. It's an incredible instrument when you understand how to do this. So in summary, when we talk about TEFRA and DEFRA, this corridor dictates the minimum amount of insurance that the IRS requires based upon what? Your age, your gender, and your health. And if you're uninsurable, then it depends upon the insured's age, gender, and health, but the owner can own that policy if the goal is to get the income. And that keeps the COI, the cost of the insurance, the same And it doesn't matter. The older you are, the less insurance that's required. Now, the last concept I want you to understand in this episode. Many agents don't understand this. Let's go back to this example. If you're 60 and you want to put in $500,000, and TEFRA and DEFRA dictates $1,250,000. By the way, you ought to know that it's approximately that right off the top. When you do enough of these, you'll know exactly at age 50, age 60, age 70, approximately what the ratio is between the GSP and the minimum death benefit under TEFRA and DEFRA. You'll just learn it because you do so many of them. But if you put in $500,000 and you choose the option where this qualifies as part of the death benefit, what happens? Now, the insurance company is only at risk for the difference between $500,000 and $1,250,000 because a $500,000 of it is your money now. You've self-insured. So the insurance company is only at risk for the remaining $750,000 if you died the next day. So they only charge you for $750,000. They don't charge you for $1,250,000. They charge for the net amount at risk, the $750,000. Got it? Watch. So I throw in $500,000, and let's say it earns 10%. And let's say I don't take out the income, I let it sit and compound. Now 10% divided into the rule of 72 means your money will double every 7.2 years. So I put in $500,000, I'm just being simple here. You put in $500,000, and in 7.2 years, it's going to double to what? 1 million. If you're earning 7.2%, which is the worst return I have earned in the worst decade since the Great Depression, 2000 to 2010, using indexed universal life, then that $500,000 would double to 1 million in 10 years, rule of 72. 7.2% return divided into 72, it doubles in 10 years. So now, in 7 or 10 years, my $500,000 of cash value has grown tax-free to $1 million. How much is the insurance company now at risk for? Well, the death benefit was $1,250,000. Now I've self-insured for $1 million of the $1,250,000 because $1 million of it is my own money now. So the insurance company is only charging me for $250,000 even though I'm 7 or 10 years older. What? You mean I'm 10 years older and they're charging me less? That's what I've been trying to tell you. The older you get, the cheaper it becomes because the amount of insurance that you're being charged for goes down because the amount at risk is now only 1/5 what it used to be. It's $250,000 is what they're at risk. Now, maybe you're ahead of me. If you have $1 million after 7 or 10 years, and it keeps earning that rate of return of 10%, which I've been earning 10.07% average, it's going to double from $1 million to $2 million in another 7.2 years. So by 14 and a half years from now, the original $500,000, if I haven't taken out any income, it's now worth $2 million. Wait a minute. I have $2 million of cash value and the original death benefit was only $1,250,000? Yeah. How much is the insurance company at risk? But TEFRA and DEFRA said, up until age 95, some companies it's age 100, the death benefit must stay ahead of your cash value that's growing by 5 percentage points. So, if in 15 years I have $2 million of cash value, this death benefit is now $2.1 million because the death benefit grows with the cash value. But I have $2.1 million, 5% more than my cash. I have $2.1 million of life insurance, but $2 million of it is my own money. How much is at risk? $100,000 to the insurance company. You're going to learn that the interest you are earning on $2 million at that point, in the 15th year in this example, the interest you're earning on that $2 million, in order to cover the cost of the net amount at risk, the $100,000, is minuscule. The actual cost of insurance after 30 years in a maximum funded indexed universal life policy is generally 1/20th what it was when you were 30 years younger. I have policies that after 30 years, I'm 30 years older, and they cost 1/20th what they did, only 5% of what they did when I was 30 years younger. In other words, it's gotten way cheaper as I got older. Now, if you've never seen one that does that, you haven't seen one designed correctly. And frankly, most insurance agents have not seen it. And most people in the financial services industry don't even know these exist. So the older you are, the cheaper it becomes when you design it that way. And so what I basically tell people is, on average, if you were to earn 11 like I have, 11.17 for the last 25 years, I net a little over 10. Now, some years I've earned 25 and netted 24. Sometimes I don't earn anything in it in a given year. Before indexing came out, I was earning an average of 9.2, netting 8.2. Whatever it is, if you earn 7, you net 6. You earn 9, you net 8. But that 1% is sort of an average. In the first few years, while you're funding it, especially under what you're going to learn next, TAMRA, the first few years, it may be more than 1%. But then as you look at the 10, 20, 30-year big picture, it's usually around 1%, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little bit less based upon how you design it. But it's usually 1 percentage point. So if you earned 11 and netted 10 like I have, the cost of the insurance that drains out of this spigot is around 1% of your gross rate of return, one of the percentage points. But based on what I just told you, I'm 68. Some of the policies I've had for 35, 40 years now, if this year I earned 11, I would net 10.9. Why? Because if I'm looking at just this year, I earn 11, I net 10.9 because the amount of insurance that I'm paying for is so minuscule compared to the amount of interest I'm being credited on the policy in this year. I look at retroactively back to day one, and the average is usually around 1%. So I just keep it simple for my clients, and I go, at the end of the day, if you earn 11, you'll probably net around 10. If you earn 16, you'll net 15. If you earn 9, you'll net 8. But the older you get, it actually gets better in that given year when you analyze it. Now you realize that the insurance company is only charging you for the net amount at risk. And if the amount of insurance is going down because your cash value is growing and qualified as part of the death benefit, then this is why it turns into a cash cow and the insurance gets cheaper as you get older.